We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com. Welcome to another edition of AVRant. I'm Tom Antry, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AVRant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. So we're trying a Zoom thing today because I couldn't log into Skype because all my Microsoft accounts seem to be like not log-inable, and I don't know if it has something to do with Xbox coming out, whatever. But anyway,
we'll talk about that soon.
People who are like, yeah, I want to get Rob's settings for Xbox Series X and PlayStation 5. I will get on that, but I haven't received systems yet because we're recording this earlier in the week. It's not Friday yet. You might be listening to this on Friday, but we're recording it earlier, so I don't have my consoles yet. My Xbox Series X is supposed to arrive today.
Oh, very exciting for you. Hopefully they won't arrive during the podcast. That would be...
It very well might.
Oh, yeah, but they'll probably deliver to your door, right? You've got like a box or something.
Well, yeah, but they'll ring. It requires a signature.
Ah. Well, the long saga of my renovation is nearly done. It would have been done tomorrow.
Okay.
But we found a problem with the with some doors in my kitchen.
Yeah.
Which is not his problem. He didn't do anything wrong. I told him to put, the designer told me to tell him to put these drawer pulls on, and we did. And then we put them on, and then nobody touched those doors for like 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. And then I started loading them up, and as soon as I did, I realized that the doors didn't open all the way because the drawer pulls are too long, and they hit the wall and whatever. So we got to get that fixed. But other than that, and a few little touch-up things, which are mostly in the garage, we are done. So I'm locking my front door. Actually, we're changing locks.
Yeah.
There have been many people with access to my key for months now that we're gonna change the locks, and it's gonna be the end of that. So we're very thankful that we are at the end of this, and thank you everybody for your support and concern and everything else. We made it through, knock on wood, with no COVID, so which is shocking considering the amount of fights I had to get in to get people to actually wear a mask in my house.
Right.
So, but we made it through, so that's good. But at this point, we're still getting every once in a while, like the kids went to a Boy Scout thing, not last weekend, but the weekend before that, and we found out on Friday that one of the adults that was at that thing tested positive. So we had to all go get tested and everything else. Wow. We're all fine, but it's just it's just that little reminder, like just when you think things are getting kind of normal-ish and you're getting used to this new normal, you're like, oh, by the way, you might die. Oh, dang, gotta go back and get tested. So luckily we've been fortunate that we've somehow made it through, but I 100% take all the credit for that by being like the world's biggest stickler on masks in my house. I mean, it amazes me how many people think that just because they don't think masks work, that they can come into your house not wearing a mask. It's like, you may not think pants work, but if you try to come in my house without pants on, you and I are going to have a problem. It's the exact same attitude I had towards masks.
Yowza.
So here we are.
Yep.
All right. This is AVRant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. To get your questions answered, all you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. You go to avrant.com, leave us a comment there, facebook.com/avrantpodcast, youtube.com/avrant. You can talk to Rob directly at rob@avrant.com. His Twitter is @firstreflect. I'm Tom at avrant.com. My Twitter is @avrant_Tom. I want to thank our listeners of the week. To become a listener of the week, all you have to do is support the podcast in some way. One of the ways you can do that is going to avrant.com and clicking on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link. That will take you to a PayPal donation site. So we want to thank Clay and Jonathan for doing that this week. Thank you very much, Clay. Thank you, Jonathan.
Yeah, very much appreciated. Clay and Jonathan, thank you so much for the PayPal donations.
And we want to thank our 122 patrons over at patreon.com, including John. I think that's a different John. That's not Jonathan, because I don't think Jonathan ever goes by John. He always goes by Jonathan.
Yeah, probably wouldn't add an H if he did. So
yeah, probably not. But you never know. I mean, what is Richard and Dick? I mean, who knows? Nicknames are weird. Well, Patreon is a service where you can sign up to be a supporting member of a creative force in your life. If that creative force you enjoy so much as us, then you sign up, and once a month, Patreon will take some money from you and give it to us. So thank you to our 122 patrons, including John.
Yeah, that's patreon.com/AVRant podcast. If you would like to sign up, think of it as a voluntary subscription, if you please. And yeah, very thankful for our 122 patrons over there, including John. Thank you for being one of them.
And if you can't support us financially, we completely understand. Just tell us what you did to support us, and we'll mention you here. So, different John, I'm guessing?
I think it's actually the same John when I was writing things up.
Same John. All right. John, again, wanted to give a shout out to Cross Spectrum Labs. He loves his individually calibrated U-Mic 1 and told them he bought it because of us. And we got some notes of gratitude for keeping the podcast going from, I guess, probably the same John.
I think it is. Yeah.
the hat trick here.
It is.
John with the hat trick. Gurinder, Mitch, Jonathan, which I'm pretty sure is the same Jonathan. So he got it's not a hat trick if you got two. What is it? Like a rim shot? I don't know.
I've never heard it as that term, but yeah.
Well,
there is a term for scoring twice in a game, like there is hat trick for scoring 3 times.
All right. Anyways, John, Gurinder, Mitch, Jonathan, and Art. So thank you, gentlemen.
Yeah, John, congrats on that U-Mic 1 purchase. Thank you very much for talking us up to Herb over at Cross Spectrum Labs. Really appreciate that. And then John, Gurinder, Mitch, Jonathan, and Art. Really do appreciate those notes of encouragement and gratitude for keeping the podcast going. It's very helpful to get that emotional support right now. So it is appreciated. And we thank everybody for continuing to listen and sending in your questions.
That's right. And as a reminder, on Thanksgiving Day, from what I've been told, there will be a special podcast that will be the Thankful on Infinite podcast, massive crossover event where all the AV podcasts that matter, as far as I'm concerned.
All the old guard. And one very
the
new
old guard. Yeah, everybody else is new. I mean, I think, DJ's kind of new too, I think. But, We're the old guard. So the HT guys, AVRant, and the Bright Side Home Theater Podcast will be doing a crossover event where we talk about all the things we're thankful for in AV.
Yeah.
And I guarantee you Xbox One S is not going to be one of them. So let's just anybody out there going, I hope it's Microsoft. And I'm going to let you know. Probably not going to make the list. I'm just going to let you know. I'm sorry.
Looking forward to it. It's part of the reason Tom and I are trying out Zoom right now. Hopefully that works. So far, it's been a little bit glitchy with Tom's video over on my end and recording it.
I got a note that said that my internet was unstable. I'm like, oh, really? Because I'm hardwired in, and I made sure we started this podcast when 2 of my 3 children were offline. So, I mean, they might be out there streaming God knows what, but they're not supposed to be.
All right.
In the news here, HDMI LLC tweeted it out, and the listing is live on Best Buy's website. Rocketfish has officially certified ultra-high-speed HDMI cables in 2-foot, 4-foot, 8-foot, and 12-foot lengths. $30, $40, $55, and $80 respectively. Going by the images, they're kind of like a small garden hose. Pretty thick, man. Pretty big. When you just look at the end of the connector and look at the pipe that's going to the other side.
Yeah.
There's a lot of wire in there.
Cable jacket is pretty much as thick as an HDMI connector. Not quite as thick as that, but getting close. So that is definitely not an ultra skinny cable. But to get you up to 12 feet, I guess that's what you have to do.
It's going to turn like a semi. Real slow. So, don't try to shove it in your corner when you're trying to make that 90 degree as you're tucking it in. It's not going to work. All right. So some Xbox love here. Xbox Series X and S and the PS5 are out, and everything's broken.
These are reports. I can't confirm any of these yet, but by the time you're hearing this podcast, it will be the case that all of these consoles have launched.
Check his Twitter.
And
he will be tweeting about it. I guarantee it.
Yeah, and people have been testing it beforehand. So these are the early reports. I will either confirm or refute what has been said on these topics.
All right. The PS5 PS5 doesn't have VRR, variable refresh rate, and it doesn't have 8K output options, even though the logo is on the box. And there's no Dolby Vision support either. So, kind of like a hat trick again.
Right. Yeah, also no Dolby Atmos support in games. People have been iffy on whether or not it supports it from the Ultra HD Blu-ray player, because apparently nobody knows how to test that, which should be a very simple thing, but the tech journalists out there, I don't know what's going on. They all just seem to be marketing departments at this point. They all forgot how to attach the stand, even though Sony had a whole video on here's how you attach the stand, and they all mentioned it. Then they all forgot how to do it. So it's a good thing I'm around.
All right. The Xbox Series X has raised black levels when playing Ultra HD Blu-ray discs. It also has a Netflix app that's stuck in HDR all the time, no matter what.
That's right.
Okay. And then on LG's, the VRR on LG OLEDs has unstable black levels and flickering when it's plugged into what? Anything?
Xbox Series X.
Okay, Xbox Series S goes okay. And Sony's ready for PlayStation 5 X900H TVs look blurry in 4K 120 mode, which is what they were going for, I think. It's a stylistic choice. They wanted to go back, harken to the old days of the first Batman movie when the fight scenes were shot so close and so fast. You're like, what? Who's punching who? What's going on? Listen, we're trying to make Michael Keaton look buff, dude. We gotta move this camera. We gotta.
So, all of the testing was done on technically pre-release hardware. It was supposed to be final hardware and everything, but, obviously if people have been testing it and writing about it for a couple of weeks now, it was pre-release, so we'll see how much of this is fixed with firmware updates, or if there were, in fact, any updates done before the the real release to all consumers and that. But I'll be testing this stuff out once I actually have the things in hand, and hopefully be able to talk about it on next week's episode. All right.
On November 11th, Den and Marantz are set to release the firmware update that will add DTSX Pro. DTSX. There's a hyphen. There's a hyphen. Not hyphen. Colon in between that.
DTSX.
Pro. And DTS Neural X Pro
I said that backwards.
Whatever. To their 13-channel models, the X8500H, the X6500H, and the AV8805.
X6700H. That's.
What did I say? 68?
You said 65, because all the other ones have 5s in them, but not that one.
That's what threw me off.
It's only the X6700H.
I'm really skimming this thing. I'm not actually reading it. It's a problem here. So the firmware will also update all 2019 receiver models to allow DTS upmixing to be applied to Dolby signals again, which is nice. Mm-hmm. Audioholics is reporting that the X8500 and the AV8805 will also gain front-wide speaker support when using the Dolby Surround upmixer, but there's a question mark there, so we're thinking not.
Well, because I'm really unsure about that. I'm not exactly sure where they got that information. I would like it to be true. I hope it is true. The Dolby Atmos for Home white papers have not been updated since 2018. So if Dolby has decided to start supporting front-wide speakers using the Dolby Surround upmixer, it's not out of the question. It's possible, but I haven't heard anything else on that front. So I'm wondering if it was a little bit of a misinterpretation on the part of the Audioholics write-up, because if you take the two combined factors of DTS upmixers can now be applied to Dolby signals again, because in 2019 they took that away, but now they're giving it back. And then you combine that with the DTS Neural X Pro upmixer can upmix to 13 speakers, including front wides, then that would mean that you can upmix Dolby signals to use front wide speakers, but via the DTS Neural X Pro upmixer. So maybe somebody took that information and was like, oh, you can upmix Dolby to use front wides now, and just assumed it was the Dolby Surround upmixer, because as it stands, the Dolby Surround upmixer will never put any sounds into front wide speakers. Dolby Atmos can, if objects exist in the Dolby Atmos soundtrack that coincide with the front wide positions, but the Dolby Surround upmixer will never use front wides. If that's changing, great, but I haven't seen that information elsewhere outside of that Audioholics report. So
that makes sense. All right, some comments here from last week. Rob mentioned the user manuals for Anthem's new AV receivers and pre-pros. Those were pulled offline right around the time we were recording, so that was up-to-date information that immediately became obsolete.
Right. Well, in a way, I'm kind of hoping that what was mentioned in the manuals about DTS up mixers not being applied to Dolby signals. I'm like, well, hey, Denon and Marantz are changing that. Maybe Anthem is too. So that's one hopeful change, because I hope that is the case. I would like to be able to cross-pollinate up mixers. And the other one is what I mentioned about Dolby volume, which, as I mentioned on Anthem's older receivers, which you can look at the older manuals, and it still describes in there how you first turn Dolby volume on, but then you can turn just the dynamic range compression component of Dolby volume off independently, but it will still apply curves of equal loudness. And that's what I really want. I want the ability to apply curves of equal loudness without also applying dynamic range compression.
Absolutely.
So I'm hoping, since Anthem did it before in their previous models, that they will do it again in these brand new models. But in the manual that I saw when they first got posted, it just mentioned Dolby volume as off, low, medium, or high, which is the same as everybody else's implementation of Dolby volume, and no mention of being able to turn off the dynamic range compression separate of the curves of equal loudness. So, hoping that will also change with the manuals having been pulled down. I'm sure new ones will eventually be put back up, and we'll check then if anything has changed.
All right, Gurinder got new home theater recliners. He was just excited and wanted to share of Valencia, Tuscany. That's a place or the name of the
That
brand?
is the name of... So Valencia is the brand and Tuscany is the model.
Okay. They're very comfortable, but not so plush that they make you fall asleep. Try me. You'd be surprised what I can fall asleep on. They will result in some more changes to Gurinder's theater, though. They're taller than his old seats, so the screen will be raised, and the back row now needs a riser. Dude, this is exactly what happens whenever you make a change. This is why anytime my wife or anybody really says, oh, you know what if we just made this a little small change? I'm like, listen, you just don't make a change. Like, unless you're ready to start redoing everything, because that's exactly, what? It was a 2-day job, Rob.
Yep.
2-day job. And now, 7 months later, I've got a new kitchen. It's exciting. Mm-hmm. Sort of.
Well, congrats to Gurinder on the purchase of those seats.
Yes.
They look very nice. Other people have also said how much they like them, so no surprises there. That's good. And just for my peace of mind on a side topic, Tom, can you double check to make sure your audio recording's working? Just because I'm not recording your audio inside of OBS.
Yeah, it's recording.
Okay,
Yeah.
no, I just want to make sure, because otherwise we don't have a backup.
That's all right. And Gurinder, actually, if you can't see the YouTube video, or if you're not going to see the images, there's a love seat and then a single seat by itself, but they're all attached with like the arms with the cup holders and stuff. And you can see the little remote control light up thing in the side there, so they're all powered and everything.
Powered headrests,
heated.
power recline.
Yeah,
all the good stuff.
Very fancy. Fancy. I like them. All right. Nathan wanted to comment after Gurinder asked about 3D glasses for JVC projectors last week and whether to get a new screen that retains JVC's horizontal polarization. Nathan confirms that retaining the polarization is unnecessary in order for 3D to still function. And not only that, but if you go with a white screen that does not retain the polarization, you can use any active shutter glasses that can synchronize with JVC's 3D emitter. The typical recommendation is to get the Expand... starts with uppercase X, then PAN, and then uppercase D.
Yeah,
because
I'm not sure if it's expand or it's expand-D. That's the name.
It can't be expand-D.
Because it's all 3D, so I was like, maybe they get you to pronounce the D, and that's why it's capitalized, and the pan, I don't know. I think it's just expand.
I will very rarely blame like a group of people for this, for one thing that happens, but whatever age group you have to be in order to think that you need to put an X and then change the cases, just stop it. I don't know if it's millennials or whatever comes after millennials. I don't care who you are. Stop it. Stop it with the lowercase i's. Stop it with the uppercase X's. Just stop. Anyways, the Expand glasses, whatever, they're $65 Canadian if you're Canadian.
That's like $100 less than the official JVC ones, so that could be worth it.
All right, here we go. Into the questions here. Nick asks, when do we predict the current 4K JVC projection models will see a price discount? Do we expect new models next year with the current models going on clearance? Didn't they just released new models kind of recently? I feel like they had.
No, this is the third year of the current models in JVC's lineup. So
usually with projectors, you see stuff like that being announced at CEDIA and not CES. So if you're going to see something change, it's... Well, I mean, it would have been at CEDIA, which was, isn't that last month? Wasn't it supposed to be last month? Did they cancel it?
So the current models, they came out in 2018. Then last year, 2019, is when they did the first firmware update that added frame-by-frame dynamic tone mapping. And then this year at CEDIA 2020, they announced and released the second firmware that has refined the frame-by-frame tone mapping. So this is now 3 years that we've gone with these JVC models. We were waiting for this year's CEDIA, which was all held online and virtual, to see if there would be new JVC models, because it's not that unusual for new models to come out every 2 years, but it has been 3 years. So I would anticipate that next year, 2021, and we're talking the end of 2021, not the beginning. But I would anticipate that we might see new models then, because a 3-year life cycle is... they don't typically go much longer than that, although there was that one time when Epson went 4 years in between model years, so it's not out of the question. But my guess would be that 2021, end of 2021, we do see new JVC models. Typically, the outgoing models do go on clearance, but you don't normally see massive price drops on them. Versus the MSRP, yes, they'll come down $1,000, maybe $1,500 versus the original MSRP, but you can already buy them at about $500 to $1,000 below MSRP at most retailers. If you just call them and talk to them, they don't sell it at full MSRP. So that's seems to be the way things normally go with JVC. They are a higher end model, lower production numbers, just not as many people buying them. So you don't see massive clearance discounts, because there usually isn't just that much stock left over on them anyway. I think that's it.
Okay. Infinite Gary asked, if you are playing 2-channel music from just a pair of speakers, you get that phantom center image that makes it sound like the singer is dead center directly in front of you, assuming your seat is centered and the singer is mixed to be centered in the recording, of course. But if you walk up to either speaker while that song is playing, suddenly all of the sound seems to be coming from just that one speaker. Gary knows this is the stereo effect, but how does it actually work? When we are listening in our seat, how come we can't tell that the sound is coming from one speaker to our left and one speaker to our right? How come? Wait a second. I'm confused. What is this question? Why does it seem like it's coming from the one speaker when you're close, or how does stereo work?
No, it's that if you walk right up to the speaker, you walk up to the left speaker, then you walk over to the right speaker, all the sounds are in that one speaker. And when you're right in front of that single speaker, you don't get the sensation that the sound is coming from in between them. But once you go back a ways to your seat that is centered between the speakers and some distance back, you get the illusion that the sound is coming from dead ahead center. Why can't our ear brain system tell that it's actually the sound is coming from the left and the right? They're identical in the left and the right, but why can't we tell that it's coming from two locations? Why does our ear brain system put that together and say, oh, it's coming from straight ahead of you, when in fact it is not? So I think the easiest way to explain that is, it is an illusion. The stereo effect is an audio illusion. It's akin to our stereo depth perception of vision, because our left eye and our right eye actually only detect 2 dimensions, height and width, but we take the slightly offset positions of our eyes, and our brain puts those two things together to give us the illusion of 3-dimensional vision from having 2 images offset. So with our ears, let's imagine that there was one audio source directly in front of us, straight ahead. So its sound would be coming forward, and it would be hitting our left and right ears simultaneously. We would be getting the same sound in our left ear and our right ear at the same volume at the same time. That's if the sound source genuinely were straight ahead of us. So if you have the effect of headphones or speakers, where there are 2 sources of sound, but the sounds from those speakers end up reaching our left and right ears at the same time, at the same volume. Our brain puts that together and goes, oh, if I'm getting the same signal in both ears at the same time, at the same volume, then the sound should be straight ahead of me. That's right. That's the illusion that is being created. So that is the stereo effect, is what we call that illusion. Now, if we want that illusion to break down, what you do is create a discrepancy between the volume from one speaker versus the other, or the timing from one speaker versus the other. So those are the things we call the precedence effect and the Haas effect. The precedence effect says that you need a certain amount of time in between the two sound sources. So if the sound from the left speaker were to arrive at your ear, approximately, what is it? I think 10 milliseconds, something like that we need. Whatever the number is, we can look it up in the Wikipedia article for the precedence effect. But as long as there's a certain amount of time where one side reaches your ear before the other, then our brain will be able to tell, oh, it's actually coming from over on that side. And similarly, if there's a difference in the volume level, which I think needs to be something like 7 decibels, but again, I'm not remembering exactly. I'd have to look up the exact numbers, but...
Yeah, it's 10 dB louder, or it's about 10 to 20 milliseconds and play that level up to 10 dB louder.
Cool. I wasn't egregiously off, but there again, even though it's the same sound being played out of both speakers, if there's that discrepancy in volume, again, our brain will be able to tell, oh, it's actually coming from different locations. So that's what we rely upon, is having the exact same sound at both ears at the same time, at the same volume, and then it creates the illusion that it's straight ahead of us.
Right. It's just replicating what would be in real life.
That's
so
right.
Like you said, if we were out on the Serengeti plains and some big cat was stalking us and we heard something and it was from our right, it would get to our right ear first and our left ear a little bit later, and that would tell us it was to the right. Vice versa, if it was coming from our left, it get to our left ear first instead of our right. If it's right in front of us, it comes to both both at the same time. So that's how it is an illusion, but because it's coming from two different sources at the same time. But for our brain, it's not so much tricking it as much as it is replicating what real life sounds like when something is directly in front of you and giving you that wall of sound, or that uniform sound to both ears. Kevin is currently using a pair of Paradigm Studio 20 bookshelf speakers as his surrounds. Due to some placement and cabling restrictions, they are positioned at roughly plus or minus 120 degrees. Is that from where?
From straight ahead. Straight ahead is 0, so plus or minus 90 degrees would be directly to your sides.
Yeah, so they're behind him a little bit.
They're behind him.
Would adding surround backs improve things in any way considering the placement of his surrounds? He says that his room is a long T shape with the left, center, right speakers across the top of the T. So they're behind you, and then you're wanting to put more speakers behind you. Well, I guess it depends on how far behind you could put them. I would guess that I would... Regardless, I mean, everybody knows I don't like surround back speakers, or I don't. It's not true. I don't not like them. I don't value them. And in this case, I would really not value them because I figured the angles would be such that no matter how far distant they were from each other physically, the angles would be so close as to be, as far as your ears are concerned, a very similar point of origin. So
yeah, I mean, the thing is, when you have so like if you've got a 5.1 setup instead of a 7.1 setup, when you have the 5 speakers, both Dolby and DTS actually recommend that you have the surround speakers some ways behind you. They typically recommend between 110 to 120 degrees. So you're actually within spec as long as you're sticking with 5 speakers. And you already said because of restrictions, you aren't able to move them farther forward, closer to plus or minus 90 degrees directly to your sides. So when you have a 7-speaker setup, Dolby would have you position your surround speakers directly to your sides and then have surround back speakers behind you. But when you only have 5, they would have you move the surround speakers farther back a bit to about 120 degrees, which is exactly where they are. So would you hear a big improvement with surround backs behind you? I'm assuming he says he's got a pretty long T-shaped room, so he probably has a fair amount of space behind him.
Yeah, one would think.
And I mean, really, it's a matter of if you get a circling pan type of sound, does it really sound like everything just disappears behind you, just crumbles, and it's like, it went from your surround right and jumped to your surround left and never created any type of illusion that it moved in behind you. If you're completely losing that and you super duper care about a circular pan like that, which is rare, but hey, some people, that's their bag. That's the thing they care about most. Then having speakers actually behind you, it would fill in that gap that's there if you're even hearing it. But the whole idea of having your surrounds a little bit farther back is that it helps fill in that illusion that sound is from behind you because the speakers are physically a little ways behind you. So yeah, I'm not against it. I'm also not going to say, oh, you must, because yeah, you'll have to decide based on that. If you really, really, really care about filling that in behind you, then yeah, it could be worthwhile since you have a lot of space behind you.
He says, what about a single surround back speaker for a 6.1 configuration? So if I were going to do that, I would not do that. But I would do like THX's original suggestion, which is having two speakers behind you, but closer together.
But close together. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, rather than apart. The reason is and this is not necessarily likely to happen, but in 6.1 configurations, especially if you're using a direct firing or we call a monopole speaker, a normal bookshelf speaker back there, you can get a slap echo from the front of your room. Many times the front of your room's got a big screen on it, flat panel or something like that, and the sound from the single surround back speaker that's directly behind, like in line with your head, will come, hit the screen, and then bounce back towards you. And because of that bounce, we had many problems with people complaining that the surround back speakers, surround back information was coming from their center channel. And we're like, well, that's not, how can, that can't possibly be the case. But that's what it sounds like.
Right.
So with THX's recommendation, you would basically put two speakers. And that's what I kind of have in mind because of placement restrictions. I cannot put my surround backs where they're supposed to be because there's a door and no space around that door for me to put anything. So I have them I've had them within like 2 feet of each other, maybe 2.5 feet of each other. Yeah. And they're that way they're like firing over my shoulders, so to speak, and eliminates any sort of issue with that. So could you do that? You could. Yeah. Unless, like Rob's saying, it sounds like there's a massive void behind you and you never hear any information coming from overhead. I mean, it's very easy to test. You just, get something that either pans or get something that goes direct. And there's so many movies that's open with like a spaceship going overhead or a helicopter going overhead.
Star Wars Episode 2.
I know, right? That's the first. I hate recommending it. It's like the only reason that I ever.
It's an easy test scene.
I think I've seen that scene about 500 times, and the rest of the movie twice.
Right. And the other one is Avengers, the first Avengers movie, Marvel's Avengers, the Battle of New York, where there is a circling pan that sound goes all the way around the room 360 degrees.
So if you're not hearing some sort of big, massive hole in your... So save your money.
Yeah. Agreed.
All right. I thought you were going to usually add something. So his local Paradigm dealer is offering some signature ADP3 surround speakers for a good price. Would they perform better than his Studio 20 bookshelf surrounds? Now, I looked these things up, and they are, it's got like a front-firing woofer, and it looks like it's like a trapezoidal shape, and there's side-firing tweeter and mid-range, it looks like. And they're discontinued, but their initial price was about $2,300 a pop.
Right.
So I don't know what kind of good price you could be getting these for, but there's no price I can imagine that he could be selling them for that I would think that you would get that much performance difference out of what you're currently using. And in many ways, nowadays, that type of speaker, that type of surround speaker where we were trying to have a more diffuse sound in the back of the room, back when we first started getting surround sound, we don't recommend that anymore because of basically Atmos and DTSX and these new sound formats. It's easier for the speaker system to recreate an object within your room with direct firing speakers versus these more diffuse speakers. Now, would this speaker sound bad? Absolutely not. Would it sound better than what you currently have? maybe.
I think,
but
yeah,
not that much. Not enough to justify whatever price. Dude, if you knocked $2,000 off that price, I'd still be going, oh, I don't know, $300? $600 for two of them? I don't know.
Yeah,
I mean
depending
that's honestly my opinion.
on what this price is. I mean, if it's very affordable, I think it comes down to, because I used to be a big fan of using dipole surrounds.
Yeah, me too.
But that was when we only had 5.1.
Yeah.
And it really was about trying to recreate the sound that you got in movie theaters where they had multiple side surround speakers and you just wanted that diffuse sound of, I really can't tell where the sound is coming from. It's just kind of over to my left and it's kind of over to my right. And that was...
Because there's 7 speakers over there and they're like 45 feet away
That's
from
right.
you.
Yeah. So it's the vaguely over there and the vaguely over the other side. So that's... if that's... I mean, again, it can be a to-taste thing. Because if what you want is the most sense of there's sound just coming from all around me, it's not particularly distinct. I can't pinpoint exactly where, but it really sounds like I'm just being bathed in sound. Then that is the type of speaker that you would want to go for. And you could, of course, move your current Studio 20 speakers to surround back duty and do all the things that you want to do there, but it would cost you whatever this discounted price on the ADP3s is. But if you're the opposite and you're saying, no, what I really want is the most precise, I can tell exactly where this sound is coming from, then you would want to avoid the ADP3 speakers. There's no right or wrong there. You can choose what your type of preference is.
Stan. Dude, okay, first of all, let me just go back real quick. Kevin, dude, I got to know the price on these things before I want to know what this really good price is. So let us know what this really good price is, because, I mean, I'm telling you, if he knocked $2,000 off those things, I'd still be going, maybe, okay. $600, that's kind of a lot. Stan has a 2.1 setup using a Marantz SlimLine NR1710 receiver with a pair of Ascend Sierra 2 EX bookshelf speakers and an SVS PB2000 Pro sub. He isn't a huge fan of the EQ that is applied if he just plugs in Odyssey just plugs in the Odyssey mic and runs Odyssey Multi EQ. It seems to be helpful for the sub, but not so great for the mid-range and treble of his speakers. Is there any way to have it leave his speakers alone and only EQ the sub? This is just multi-EQ?
It is just Mult-EQ in the SlimLine, but it is a recent enough model that it can use the Odyssey Editor app.
Well, then you can tell it to do whatever the heck you want it to do if you've got the Odyssey Editor app. So,
yeah.
Yes.
You will need to spend the money to
$20.
purchase the Odyssey Editor app, but that is precisely the way that you would come at this. You can gate the response, like you can tell it how far up in the frequency range it applies EQ. So if you say, hey, I don't want you touching anything above 250 hertz or anything above 500 hertz, you can do exactly that in the Odyssey Editor app, and it will only EQ below that frequency. And then you can also manually change the target curve. If you're like, I want a bass boost, or I want a big hump around 40 and 50 hertz because I want the kick drum to hit especially hard, you can do that now in the Odyssey Editor app. So the answer is yes, but it will cost you a little bit of money in the form of purchasing the app.
There you go. Chad. At the moment, Chad has a 5.2.4 configuration using a Denon X6400H with Ascend Sierra Tower and Horizon front speakers with the RAAL ribbon tweeters, M&K 750 surrounds positioned behind his seats on the shelf for the time being, and RSL C34E in-ceiling speakers for Atmos, which are installed within 2 soffits that run down each side of his room. He actually has 6 of them pre-installed since they were fairly inexpensive, and he might want to expand to 9.2.6 one day. So if you can't see this room, it's an all-white room with, I want to say that's terrazzo floor. It looks like terrazzo to me.
Oh, yeah. I was always thinking it was carpet at first, but you're right. No, it isn't.
Yeah, that looks like terrazzo.
Yeah,
we have terrazzo all over Florida, so I'm fairly familiar with it. He's got a big area rug. It looks like Persian style or Turkish style rug. A couple of seats, 2 subs up front is what it looks like there, and a bunch of big black 2x4 by 4 feet room treatments on his walls, and some of them freestanding, it looks like, over by windows and stuff like that. So he's got room treatments. He's got windows all on his right. and all of that, and a nice little ceiling fan up there. And you can see the soffit that runs down that he's got the speakers installed. You can see which chair is his and which is his wife's. I think it's pretty clear here. He's got this leather chair for himself and this with a chaise lounger thingy for his wife, was what I'm guessing. And then whoever he doesn't like gets to sit on the gray couch on the right side of the room.
That's right.
And then the back of it opens up to the kitchen. So that's it. So we would like to install surrounds in their proper sidewall locations. He figures he can continue to use the M&K 750 speakers where they are as surround backs. Should he go for Ascend Sierra Lunas? He doesn't want any speakers that will protrude from the wall too much. He's found himself listening to a lot more multi-channel music lately, and so maybe the matching RAAL ribbon tweeters will be worth it. Multi-channel music.
I mean,
well,
physically and being able to easily mount them on the wall, yes, the Sierra Luna are a perfect choice to go along with your Sierra Tower and Sierra Horizon RAAL speakers that are at the front of your room. So, I mean, there's no downsides other than the price. You know, they're $1,150 a pair, $1,200 a pair if you get the upgraded finish. But physically and easily mounting them on the wall, they're the perfect match. So
what I would do here is you're going to be mounting something anyways, right? And I imagine you're going to want to get some sort of because how do the Lunas mount? Is it a keyhole mount?
They just got a keyhole mount. Very easy. Front ported.
Right. So, and what about the 750s? How would he have to do those?
I didn't familiarize myself with the M&Ks, but they're currently on like shelves at the back of his room.
Shelves
anyway.
At the back of the room. So yeah, I saw that.
I agree. They can just stay there. They're pretty much exactly where surround backs should be anyway. So he's just talking about adding to the sides of his room. And yeah, Sierra Lunas, I think. I mean, really, it's just a matter of as long as the price is okay with you, they're the perfect choice here.
Right. That's the big thing.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, I mean, if you want to use them, if that's what you really want, then that's fine. I mean, as far as making sure, I mean, what he'd like to. So
I mean, I think the simple thing is if you're just like that price is way too high,
right,
and you're willing to accept a not perfect timbre match, but it's still relatively close because they're aiming for the same target, you stay with Ascend and just go with the HTM 200 SE instead, which are much less expensive. They don't have the RAAL ribbon tweeters, so you won't get a perfect timbre match with your front three speakers, but you're saving all the money and still going for a very neutral frequency response.
There you go.
Yeah.
So we had some Crown amps already, and Dave over Ascend said it would be a good idea to use a beefy amp with his towers and center. Things are working well, but he'd like to get an amp that looks just a little bit nicer, preferably one that can be rack mounted. Any suggestions? He'd really like to have both RCA and XLR input options. So I'm looking at your picture here, and I'm doing the math in my head and wondering how far away you're actually sitting from these tower and center channels. Like, no speaker manufacturer ever has said it wouldn't be a good idea to have an amp with their speakers. It's not a thing. Like, they can't. It's part of the loudspeaker construction handbook, I think. When they become a speaker manufacturer, it's like, you must always recommend amps. So I'm looking at this and thinking you don't really need an amp in this room. Honestly, you've already got some, so that's fine. I would, at least before I decided to start purchasing more amps for aesthetic reasons, I would just plug them into your receiver. Because he does have a receiver, right? Does he tell us? Yes. The X6400H, and just listen to some music for a while. Now, I'm not talking like, I mean, you only have to stay in the room. I'm not asking you to, I want you to turn it up to the levels that you would normally listen at for an extended listening period, okay? And then have it run for a bit, and then go up to your receiver and put your hand on it, okay? Yeah. If your receiver is not smoking hot or, super hot to the touch, or it makes you uncomfortable, I would say to yourself, I don't need an amp, and then sell your Crown stuff, or just put it back in the box and save it for later, or keep using it, I guess, if you want to. But if you're dead set on getting an amp, There are amps out there that you can get. I mean, Emotivo is always the first one that comes to my mind in this case.
And they are rack-mountable, which might be the thing that
yes.
puts it over the top, because they sell rack ears as an add-on accessory, but they are rack-mountable. And if that's what you want, an Emotiva XPA3 Gen 3 would very nicely drive all of your front three speakers very easily.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I've never had, I mean, even the ones that don't look like they're rack mountable, a lot of times the side panels on Emotiva amps will, like I had some that had like wood side panels, but they came off, you know, a couple of screws and they came off, and so just so happened that right where those screws were holding on the side panels is where you would put the ears for the rack mounts. So they are almost always rack mountable, and they usually have both XLR and RCA inputs. So what else you got, Rob?
XPA3 definitely does. I mean, I'll of course mention Monoprice's Monolith, because those are very similar price point, very similar amount of power. I love their tremendously low noise floor, and they're rock solid. However, the Monolith is not rack mountable. You would have to put that onto a sturdy shelf inside of your rack. So there's not really much reason to steer away from the Emotiva in this instance.
All right. So he was waiting for all of the HDMI 2.1 drama to settle down, but once it does, he's definitely eyeing the 9.1.6 Monoprice HGP1 processor. If he ends up getting it, he'll need external amplification for all of his speakers, but Monolith or Emotiva XPA amps for every channel seems like overkill. What would we suggest for the overhead and surround channels? I'm looking at my little amp down there and wondering if it's rack mountable. I don't think it is.
Well, plus, he'd probably still prefer to have the option of both XLR and RCA
That's
inputs.
True. Yeah.
So Outlaw Audio is absolutely where I would point you for a little bit more reasonably priced. Yes, we're talking 120 or 130 watts per channel instead of 200 or 250. But for your surround and overhead channels, absolutely well more than you need. But now that they have the Model 5000X and the Model 7000X, they both have both RCA and XLR inputs at pretty reasonable prices. $750 for the Model 5000X, and $980 for the Model 7000X. So yeah, price points there are basically half of the 5 or 7 channel models from Emotiva, the XPA models, but the wattage is also about half.
Or you could just save all that money and just use your current receiver as an amp.
But you can't do, I see, just use it as an amplifier. Right, yeah. That's true. Yeah, repurpose.
I mean, why not? You've got the amplifier power sitting right there. You're not using the rest of it.
I don't know if it'd be enough channels for everything, though.
But he's already talking about buying a separate amp. If he gets three channels for the front, that should be enough, right, to push him over the top?
Yeah.
Or does he need 4?
Well, he
would need
honestly,
4.
the easiest way, if you end up with 9.1.6, because that's 15 speakers, would be to get a 5-channel of the high wattage one, like an XPA 5. So that'll drive your front 3 and your surrounds, let's say. And then get 2 of the Model 5000Xs, because that gives you 15 channels total.
Right.
That would be the mathematically easy way to come at it.
So his current receiver does...
it can power 9.
9. So he would need 6 additional channels?
Well, because the current one doesn't have a 7.1 analog inputs. So I think you can actually configure the receiver that he has to power 3 zones. So you could power 6 speakers with it, because you could have, left-right input for the main zone, that's powering 1 pair. Left-right input for zone 2, that's powering a pair. Left-right input for zone 3, that's powering a pair. So you can power 6 speakers using your current receiver as a dumb amplifier.
It doesn't have.
It doesn't have 7.1 inputs. Analog.
Oh, that's a problem. Okay.
Yep.
So you could fire 6 that way. Okay. He lives on an island. Well, must be nice, I guess. Out here on his own private island.
I'm sure some is nice and some other things have drawbacks.
And power isn't exactly reliable, so he's strongly considering the Surge X UPS 1000 battery backup that we mentioned. He has a middle Atlantic rack, and that includes a power outlet strip, which just adds more outlets. It isn't a surge protector, but there is also the option to add Middle Atlantic's own 15 amp surge protector within a rack space. Since the Surge X unit only has 6 outlets total, 4 battery and 2 surge only, is it okay to use that power outlet strip so that he can plug several lower power devices, the router, the modem, network switch, NAS hub for his lighting, blah, 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 into the battery backup. And what about the high current devices like amplifiers? Should he get a second Surge X, maybe one that is surge only, or should he just use the Mid-Atlantic surge protector? So he wants the battery backup so that when he loses power, he can still power stuff. Is that what I'm...
Yeah, I mean, like, he wants to be able to have battery backup for basically his networking equipment, right? He wants his lights to still work, his home automation stuff to still work, his network to still work, so he hasn't lost all internet connection. He isn't trying to power his, amplifiers, his XPA 3 or XPA 5 with a battery. That's not what he's looking to do.
Well, those things don't take any power.
I mean, I will tell you, it's totally fine to take that surge strip, because it is just more outlets. That's all that Middle Atlantic, the zero rack space one, the vertical one. It is fine to plug that into one of the battery outlets of the Surge X battery backup and just give yourself 9 outlets instead of 1. For the low power devices, don't plug something high powered into it, but he's already well aware of that, so that's fine. As for then having protection for the high powered devices, it's a question of, do you want the surge protector that you plug them into to be self-sacrificial or non-sacrificial? Because that's really the only question. The 15 amp surge protector that Middle Atlantic sells that fits right into a rack space, it does allow through the full 15 amps. So it's fine to plug your XPA 5 or your Outlaw amplifiers into the Middle Atlantic surge protector. That's different than the vertical strip. This is their actual own branded surge protector. It's fine to plug them into that, but it will sacrifice itself if there's a surge or lightning strike. If you don't want your surge protector to sacrifice itself, that's when you would pay the extra to get the Surge X. So yeah, either one is fine, just whether you want sacrificial or not.
Yeah, and for your amplifiers, you just got to make sure that they send through the entire stuff that you need.
And the Middle Atlantic one does, so it is fine.
So the seats he has in his photos are just temporary. He's going to have a couch in his main listening position, and most of the time it will be 2 people listening on the couch together. At the moment, he basically optimized the sound for just one seat. So once his couch arrives, what's the best way to optimize the sound for 2 people? Is it just a matter of adjusting the toe-in on his front, left, and right speakers? How do you make the sweet spot cover 2 seats instead of 1? Provided that you're sitting close enough to each other, it's not that much different than what you've done for the 1 seat. You get that main seat in your, because the X6500H, which I think he said he had, or 6400H, it should have XC32, correct?
It does,
that would be my guess. So you're going to take multiple measurements, and that multiple measurement comes from what is directly in front of the center channel, essentially. What's smack dab in the middle of the listening space between the 2 left-right speakers. If that's actually where somebody sits, that's fine. If it's actually between where 2 people sit, that's also fine. That's what you want your first measurement to be. Now, the problem that you have here is that it looks like you have all your subs up front, and then in the back of your room, it's just open to everything. Right? There's it looks like the kitchen's back there and everything else. So acoustically, it's very hard to predict what your subwoofers are going to be doing in here and how well they're going to be level or balanced between these 2 seats.
That shouldn't affect your imaging very much at all.
But not imaging, that's right. And that only has to do with the speakers that you have. Now, he's got the speakers that you have, Rob. So, Rob can speak to how good their off-axis dispersion is, but basically you just want to make sure that all the seats you really care about, are getting a good left-right, separation between the 2 speakers so that you don't have them. And even though this does sometimes work out that way, you want to make sure that they're hearing, like we were talking about the stereo imaging, making sure that their left ear and their right ear are getting the same information at the same that they're supposed to be getting at the same time. And sometimes that means that you have the speakers pointing directly forward, depending on how good the off-axis dispersion is, and sometimes it means you have to toe them in a whole bunch. Rob will tell you what his experiences are with the speakers that you currently own, but as a general rule of thumb, I start with them pointing straight out and then seeing how the stereo imaging affects a pan that goes from left to right at the front of the room. And then I towed them in so they're pointed directly at me to see how that works, how that sounds. And then I started adjusting them back and forth until I get the widest start point to the widest end point with no gaps in between as it goes across the front or across the front image, because I'm only in the stereo at that point.
Yeah. And that procedure is what you'll ultimately end up doing. I can just tell you from experience that with those RAAL ribbon tweeters, if you are bang on axis, they're pointed right at you, no off axis at all, that the sound right there, bang on axis, is a little bit different than just immediately off axis. Just move a tiny bit off axis, and there's a slight timbral change that you can detect there. And then from that point on, they have very wide, even dispersion. So from the images that he sent, it looks like he's got them pretty much aimed right at him.
Yeah.
They're towed in so that they look like they're aimed right at you. And so basically, if you want, because he's probably just tried sitting in his wife's seat next to him, he's like, the imaging isn't as good over here as it is right in my seat, and I've set it up so it's perfect in my seat. But what you'll end up doing is one of two things. You'll either have the speakers towed in less, so they're closer to firing straight forward in the room, because they do have that wide dispersion as long as you aren't bang on axis in one seat and then ever so slightly off axis on the other. As long as everybody is ever so slightly off axis, you get a very uniform, even sound for everybody. So in all likelihood, given your seating distance, that's what you'll probably want to do, is have them closer to aiming straight forward so that everybody in the sweet spot is a little bit off axis. But in a situation like mine, where I'm sitting very close to my speakers, I'm like within 6.5, 7 feet. Doing that doesn't work so well, because it ends up, firing past my left ear and firing past my right ear because I'm so close to them. So in my scenario, I actually have them steeply towed in, way more than you might expect, so that it's the speaker that's to my right is actually like firing towards my left, and the speaker that's on my left is firing towards my right. So if there were lines coming out of the tweeters, they would intersect in front of me. So
right.
A really steep toe,
which is very counterintuitive.
But it works, and it actually works for my whole 3-seater couch, because again, everybody is off axis now. The middle seat is off axis from the right speaker, but like to the outside edge of the cone instead of the inside edge like normal. But the theory is the same. Have everybody slightly off axis, nobody bang on axis, and that should work with those speakers.
All right. Jack is forced to work exclusively from home these days. It's all Microsoft Teams and Zoom meetings, so he needs a better microphone and mic setup. He's tried a Playtronics headset that is decent, but he'd like an improvement on the headphone side with that one. He's tried his Sony WH-1000XM3 headphones that sound fantastic to his ears, but the mic isn't very good, and they isolate so well he can't hear his own voice when he talks. He's got Animotic earphones with an inline mic, but they're a pain to put on and take off quickly. So is there a solution that is easy to put on and remove, comfortable, sounds great, and has a great mic? Or should he get a separate microphone and headphones? If so, which ones? So I had this question posed to me by one of the guys that I go to Toastmasters with, and he wanted my setup. So headphones, I kind of let him choose whatever he wanted, but I made some suggestions. Audio-Technica, the M50s were probably what I suggested. And then this microphone that we currently have, which is the AT2020, that I currently use, the AT2020, with a pop filter that I suggested that he get, and but I got him the USB version of it with a microphone stand for his desk. That's an easy go-to, will work. No problems, will sound great, will be comfortable. The M50 headphones, depending on who you are, and maybe they've changed them over the years, but when I first bought them, they took a little while to break in, and I don't mean to sound good, I meant because they were tight on my noggin, and they took a little while to break in. But how old is this podcast? Because that's when I bought those headphones, and they are still going strong today. Those headphones are bulletproof. That being said, if you're looking for a headset or a system that is more self-contained, what I would do is one of two things. I would either look at gaming headsets because there's a lot of them out there, and I would go to Twitch and watch to see what people, just flick from different channels and see what people are using. I know that the ones I see a lot of open back headphones, which surprises me on Twitch. I see people wearing like the big Audio Technicas with the open backs and stuff like that. Those would be extremely comfortable. I don't know how well they would isolate the sound from your microphone so that you wouldn't get any echo, but it seems to work for the Twitch guys. So, I mean, who am I to complain? But that's what I would do. Rob, what do you suggest?
Right along those same lines, one of the headsets that I like to recommend, because it doesn't cost too much, $70, which is, not the cheapest ever, but not outlandishly expensive. So that is the HyperX Cloud X. You can get them either in a silver and black finish or in a blue and black finish. But yeah, $70 for those. Very reasonable, comfortable, decent sound. I mean, they're not the best headphones ever, but they're for chatting. They're very good. And what I like about them is the microphone is actually quite decent. So, that checks all the boxes, easy to take on and off because it's just a headset. If you want better quality all around, I mean, exactly what Tom mentioned, the AT2020 from Audio Technica. Now, you can get it as a $200 package that comes with the boom arm that attaches to your desk, and it comes with a pair of Audio Technica's M20X headphones instead of the M50s. But again, just for, chatting on meetings and that, it's pretty much ideal for that scenario.
Right.
You can also get the microphone, of course, by itself. It's $150 for the microphone all by itself. And yeah, that'd be the AT2020 USB version, because of course that's easier to plug in. You don't have to have a microphone preamp or anything that way. You can just plug it straight into your computer with a USB connection. Yeah, that's what I would go for.
And it looks like it also comes with a desk stand too.
Yeah.
If you
a little tripod stand.
Yeah. Cool. John wants new front speakers, left, center, and right, so not just his left and right, for his great room that is open to the rest of the house. He's got a 77-inch OLED in there with a 5.1 setup at the moment. Pioneer Andrew Jones bookshelves and center up front with KEF T-Series speakers mounted on the ceilings as surrounds. The KEFs are staying, so that's don't try to change his mind on that. And an SVS SB12 NSD subwoofer. So this is a room that's open to the rest of the house, and he's got a sealed sub. So
he does.
For the money, the Pioneer speakers sound good, but John also has a dedicated theater. A solid core door has finally been installed, and he has all Ascend Sierra RAAL speakers in there. By comparison, the Pioneers are a big step down, which I would expect considering the price difference. So that is where it was prompting the upgrade. They end up watching a lot of TV in the great room. None of it is at reference volume, and the output level isn't an issue. They're about 12 feet from the speakers, but it's a wide seating area, so he's looking for a wide, even dispersion and a neutral sound with crisp dialogue. For the sake of variety, he'd like to try something other than Ascend, and he will be sticking with bookshelf models. The budget can go as high as $3,000, and he's using a Denon X3500H, so adding external amplification is possible if needed. He was considering the KEF R series. Dude, he literally took my two suggestions. KEF R series or RBH signature series. Those were literally the first two things that came to my head. There isn't much in the way of acoustic treatments other than a huge wool rug, but that isn't going to change. Behind the couch is open to the kitchen, so what do we recommend? I recommend you try what you just suggested, because that's exactly what I was going to suggest. I was like, he's got KEF in ceilings. Go, those R series KEFs would be dynamite in here.
They're actually,
and if you're not,
really good choice in like all aspects, like because they've got a little bit of directionality because of the concentric drivers, which helps a little bit when you can't address your room acoustics with passive treatments, but at the same time their dispersion is extremely even, so that if you are off axis you get exceedingly even sounding treble and mid-range. Very little reason to steer you away from that as long as the price is okay. You would not need an external amplifier to power them at your seating distance. Be easy to plug those in. He mentioned in his email, of course, the RBH Signature Series, you have the option of getting the folded ribbon tweeter. I would not advise that in this scenario, simply because they are more directional. You don't get as wide dispersion with that folded ribbon tweeter. So for your particular setup, I wouldn't go for that. If you were to go RBH Signature, I'd go for the regular dome tweeter. But I'm kind of leaning towards that KEF R series. I think that's really good. The other thing is you could consider KEF if you want compact size. There's the LS50s. In fact, the new LS50 Metas, because, if you want to say you've got metamaterial speakers. Who can get away from the LS50 Metas? You can buy an individual one as a center as well, so don't worry that normally when you look them up, of course, they show the pair for $1,500. There is a single that you can get for $750 or $800, whatever it is. I think they charge $800. It's not quite exactly half the price. My only qualm there is that you might like the KEF LS50 Metas so much that you go back to your Sierra 2s and go, toss-up, or maybe I actually prefer the KEF LS50s, so it might be a problem there, but compact size, they would certainly fit there. Other options. Less expensive would be like SVS Ultras.
Right.
Which could be a really nice choice in here. SVS Ultras do check all the boxes and don't cost quite as much as the...
Yeah, they're pretty big. I'm looking at his shelf there and wondering if they could fit. That's the thing. You might have to lie them down.
Right.
That I'm looking at them, and I don't think they, unless you move one of those shelves up, but you could lie them down and they would fit in there. I'm pretty sure.
And then when it comes to
not in that bookshelf up front though, not in your little thing up front. The center channel would be an issue.
When it comes to wide, even dispersion, Paradigm still is a champ there. If you just wanted one other thing to possibly consider. For your price point, you probably want to be looking at their Prestige series. That used to be like their Studio series. That's sort of akin to that in price and performance. So very, very good. The wide, even dispersion of Paradigm still reigns. So that's one more option there. Something out of those options should definitely do the trick. But honestly, if you're just like, I'm just going to get the KEF R series, I'll be like, yeah, that's a really solid choice.
Solid choice, right. The Ultra sensor might fit in that bookshelf, in that case you have up front. You'll have to measure it, because I can't quite tell just by looking at it, but it would be close. I don't think the Ultra bookshelves would fit on your in your bookcase, unless you put them on their sides. Rob, not just Rob, different Rob. Rob just moved, and the position where he would like to set up his TV, a brand new 65-inch LG CX OLED, cannot accommodate a wall mount. He's temporarily using his TV stand, but his OLED is perched on top of his clip center speaker, and that's making him cringe a bit. It's literally on top of the speaker.
Yes. Yeah, like the speaker is there and the TV is on the speaker.
He'd like to get a more robust entertainment stand that can handle at least 4 heavy components and allow him to properly position his TV. Any suggestions? You know what this screams for me is the Santa stands that have the pole up the back that allows you to kind of like wall mount that thing. That's what this looks like would go well in here, because yes, everything about this picture makes me cringe just a little bit. Like the legs on the stands are a little bit too small,
a little spindly.
It's like, I'm worried that it's like when you're standing on top of a Coke can. Like you ever do this for your kids? You stand on top of a Coke can and you kind of balance there, and then you tap it on the side, and the whole thing collapses. I'm just worried that a fly is going to run in and then like land on the side. The whole thing's just going to come crashing down. So yeah, that's what I would look for, is the Sanus ones that have the
they call it a 3-in-1.
So
yeah, I mean, there's options besides just the Sanus brand. If you go to Amazon, they have Transdeco is the brand. Very solid, optional casters on the bottom if you actually want it to be like somewhat movable. But at the 3-in-1 stand, so it's got like the TV mount that looks like a wall mount, but it's actually on a stalk that goes up the back. Then a really nice separated shelf on that one for your center speaker to sit on, and then 2 large sturdy shelves below that to hold all your equipment. So yeah, that Transdeco one that they sell on Amazon goes for $370. That's a little bit expensive, but a really, really nice stand, really, really solid, and gives you all the space that you need, plus easy to mount and move your TV, position it as you please. If you want less expensive, there was a brand called Z-Line that I really, really like. Their website still exists, but it seems hard to find them. Fry's pretty much has the Z-Line lineup on clearance. So you can find some really good prices. One that I like from the Z-Line collection is very similar. You know, got 3 shelves again, one for your center speaker and then a stalk up the back. And you can mount your TV on that. And then if you go over to Best Buy and just look up TV stands with integrated mounts, that's another way that you can come at it. And there'll be something there. They typically sell mostly Wallin brand over at Best Buy.
And they all have weight. They'll tell you how much weight each shelf can take.
Oh, I mean, the OLED is no problem because it's really quite lightweight for a television. And then, you can look up the weight limits for the shelves.
Shelves, that's right. James says, thanks for our response to his upgrade questions for his new apartment and where he wants to improve musicality. That's right. This is the weird, like, L-shaped thing. Yeah. So he's got some follow-up questions. Printed acoustic panels are a go. How thick should they be? Would normal people think 3.5 or 4-inch thick panels look weird? Should he stick with 2-inch thick panels? Honestly, I think people think 4-inch panels look weird. I think they're very, very. I think they look weird, and they're in my own home theater. 2-inch panels look kind of normal.
I mean, what about like GIC's 242 panels, which the insulation is 2 inches thick, but they have a little air gap behind them, so they're a little over 3 inches thick in the frame, but the insulation is 2 inches.
I mean, you could. I mean, you asked my opinion. My opinion is 2-inch panels look normal.
Okay.
And anything bigger than that, whether it's because of air or because of panel, looks like you're going to bump it off the wall every time you walk past it. So that's what I think.
Fair enough. My personal opinion is that the GIC 242 panels are probably about as thick as I would go for what I would think somebody wouldn't consider it too out of place. Once you go 4-inch thick in that, it looks a little out of place.
Yeah. So we mentioned GIC, Acoustimac, and Acoustic Panels Canada. Does one of them do a better job when it comes to quality of printing? I don't have a clue. I honestly don't have a clue. I don't know.
On this one, GIC is superior because they don't actually print; they dye the fabric. It's a sublimated dye process that they use. So the question sort of becomes, are you going to be getting up close to it? Because if you're going to get up close to it, you can see the difference in the GIC panels. From a distance, you don't see a tremendous difference, but once you get right up close to them, then the GIC ones do look better because the fabric is actually dyed instead of it being a layer of printing ink on top of the fabric.
Right.
Yeah, so that would be the difference. Again, there, if you end up going GIC, you get 242 panels. They got the little bit of extra thickness, is effective down a little bit lower in frequency, which is a nicety in a room like this that has reflections and uncontrolled stuff as far as the sound reflections go. So to me, as long as the price is reasonable, if you go GIC, you're getting the little bit better performance, little bit higher quality printing all around.
So their plan was to have shelves on the back wall behind the couch stocked with plants, books, and knickknacks. The shelves themselves are likely going to be an interesting shape, like hexagons. So would all that act as diffusion? Would that be sufficient for addressing the back of the wall? And what are the differences sonically between diffusion and absorption on the wall behind you? So absorption on the wall behind you essentially is going to absorb, I'm going to say sound, but it's only the upper register of sound. It's going to absorb that sound and reduce its volume so that if any sound comes back towards you, it's going to be at the very least lower in volume, and some of it will be missing. The highest stuff will be missing. Diffusion, regardless of what shape it takes, it does not absorb any sound. The sound hits the different structures that are behind your head. And remember, putting a bookshelf behind you, I know you said hexagons, whatever, but pretend it's a regular bookshelf and you put like all the same size book on it, well, you haven't really done anything. You still have a wall. I mean, yes, maybe it has a little bit more texture to it and stuff like that, and yes, maybe that might change some of the reflections, but it's not significant. You want like different shapes behind you. Just look up, acoustic diffuser and see what they kind of look like, and you'll see they'll have different shapes and angles and stuff on them, so that the reflections off the back wall no longer come back as a solid wave front. They all going in different directions, which tricks your ear or allows your ear or your brain to say, okay, whatever is going on behind me is not the same as the thing going on in front of me, so I'm going to pay attention to the thing that goes on in front of me. It's kind of how that works.
But it tends to be the case that diffusion only affects high frequencies.
Yes.
Really 1 kilohertz and up is where diffusion comes into play. And when we're talking about vocals, because the reason we want you to treat the wall behind you is mostly about vocal intelligibility for TV watching and for music listening. And to get vocals to sound clearer, you need to treat, hopefully down to 250 hertz. That's really what you're kind of aiming for, which is what a 3.5 or 4 inch thick panel will get you, is down to that 250 hertz range quite nicely. So ideally, particularly when your seats are relatively close to that back wall and your goal is to have that enhanced clarity and better sense of realism. I wouldn't advise going diffusion only, and this is also uncontrolled, uncalculated diffusion. It is just random objects behind you, which is better than a completely flat reflective wall, but it's not really what you described that you're wanting in terms of an improvement. Spending money on this, getting an improvement, I would encourage you to go for absorption on that back wall. Now, one thing that occurred to me is if you were going to have oddly shaped shelves anyway, GIC sells their deco shapes absorbers, which are absorbers. One of the shapes is hexagons. So what you might actually do is like, if the shape of the shelves, the size of them is right, you have your hexagon shelves, you have the deco shape absorbers within them. So they make a nice little color inside of your hexagon shelves. Then you also have the hexagon shelves. So now you have a combination diffusion and absorption.
Just leave enough room to go past, for the sound to go into the back. So, and in fact, then you could buy 2-inch thick ones and then set them in there, but don't set them
with
all the way back to the wall.
Yeah.
And now you have that air gap. Because regardless if the air gap is because you bought a thing that has a bigger frame, or literally you could just take your 2-inch panels and just put some sort of buffer between that and the wall, just like some rubber or something like that.
Little standoffs,
just to stand off from the wall, and you would essentially have the same thing.
Yeah. So I would just say don't forego absorption on your back wall. Given the performance that you said that you wanted, I would encourage still having it.
Yes. Well, we focused on critical music listening, and he mentioned going with a clipped subwoofer just to keep the looks the same as his speakers. It isn't that important to him to have a clipped sub. One black cube doesn't look that much different from another black cube when the grills are on. And he does watch a lot of movies, too, so if we forget about the clips request, which subwoofer we recommend most highly? I mean, SVS or HSU or all the ones we normally suggest. There's nothing wrong with a clip. It's just for the amount of money, for what you're trying to do in here. Mm-hmm. Especially if you want to try to pressurize, even get close to pressurizing this space, which I don't think you do, then you needed more power.
Yeah, being in Canada, with the cross-border shipping, like HSU, it tends to up the price quite a bit doing the cross-border shipping with them. You can get SVS in Canada from Electronics for Less. That's their authorized reseller in Canada. Now, our exchange rate prices are not superb on SVS, but it still ends up being a better deal than the cross-border shipping. For the type of room that he has, I wouldn't be getting you all the way up to power sound audio and that. It just physically takes up too much space, be too much of an eyesore. So on top of that, we don't know if you want to attempt the idea of going dual subs. If you do, then having the ability to control the fully variable phase during the setup process from the app in your hand while you're in your seat, instead of having to get up and down and turn a physical dial on the back of the sub, or like with the Klipsch's, they don't even have fully variable phase. That's another big plus for getting, say, the 2000 Pro series from SVS. But that would be if you're getting duals. If you're going to stick with just one subwoofer, which we don't think is the worst idea in this room because it's such an oddly shaped and open room, and you mostly care about during your critical music listening a small sweet spot. If you stuck with the one subwoofer, there isn't really a tremendous reason to go away from the Klipsch. As we mentioned, that the SPL series from Klipsch, as long as you get at least the 12-inch, maybe even the 15-inch, it's got sufficient extension and output if you go with one of those. But if you go with a 2000 Pro series sub from SVS, that would also be very nice, and you get the extra features.
With the footprint, I'm looking at his room, and I'm looking at the fact that he doesn't have a lot of space to be putting things. Mm-hmm. Looking at those cylinder subs, just
2000 Pro cylinder sub, man.
That would be my go-to in this space.
Plus, kids and dogs running around. If they happen to bump into a cylinder that is wrapped in carpet, nothing terrible is going to happen. That's and right. The cylinder comes with the isolation feet already part of the price and already installed. And you definitely want some kind of isolation between your subwoofer and the floor beneath it. So all in all, like a 2000 Pro Series cylinder, PC 2000 Pro might be a really top choice.
Dalton says he's been listening on and off for 8 years. Why off, man? What's the matter? You don't have 2 hours a week you can spend listening to us answer the same questions over and over and over again?
Hey, now. We mix it up when the questions get mixed up.
That's right. Dalton recently replaced everything in his home theater except his HD DVD player.
Can't
God,
get
Rob,
those anymore. Gotta hold on.
Your soulmate. He went all Emotiva, XMC2 Pre-Pro, XPA4 amplifier, T1 Plus. Is it T1 Plus? Is that what it is?
Yeah, T1 Plus. Yep.
Towers, C2 Plus center, B1 Plus surrounds and backs, and A1 Atmos modules. No plus there because bleh. I don't know why. I don't know what they do. Yeah. He's also got an Outlaw Model X 7000X and an SVS SB16 Ultra subwoofer and a 65-inch LG CX OLED. The room is roughly 13 by 14, but it's not enclosed. Okay, there we go.
Yeah.
And there's a large opening at the back into his dining room and an open doorway on the left into a hallway. He's got about $2,000 to spend. He's trying to figure out the best way to spend it. Man, you already kind of spent you already got all the stuff. What are we supposed to... I'm going to say room treatments, like looking at the pictures here,
that's coming up. That's coming up. Not pictured. Okay. He's already got some.
All right. I can see this. God, this subwoofer is literally right next to the chair. It's like...
But that's the sideways facing chair in that image there.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's actually the rear left corner of the room, of the theater room. So there's a seat facing forward, which is where all the surround and surround back speakers are aiming right at the forward facing seat. And then there's a sideways facing seat that has the subwoofer.
There's a lot of speakers in a very small area. There's one up in the corner. There's one
surround backs and up in the corner for Atmos.
Should he get a second subwoofer? His current SB16 Ultra is in the rear left corner of his theater room. The only other location where he could put a second sub would be the rear right corner. Would it make sense to do that, or would it make sense to stack a second sub on top of the first? Output is already plenty, or just stick with one. The space in this room is so very tight, and everything being open.
If you're noticing, so play yourself a bass sweep. I mean, first of all, if the only seat you care about is your one main seat that's facing forward, and you play a bass sweep and you're sitting in that one seat that you care about and the bass sweep sounds good, leave it alone. Right? If you care tremendously about every seat that's in here, including the ones that are going to be hard to optimize even if you had dual subs, but if you do and you play a bass sweep and you're listening in the off seats, the ones that are on the sides, and the bass sweep sounds horrible there, sounds like a whole roller coaster, or there's sounds that just completely disappear, and you care about that, well, then having more than one subwoofer is about the only way to tackle that. Stacking them will do nothing. Stacking them will just increase your output headroom, which you don't need. That's not the thing. What you might need is better uniformity across a larger seating area, multiple seats. But yeah, I suspect, given the way that the speakers are aimed in here, that he really mostly cares about that one forward-facing seat. And as long as your bass sweep sounds good in that seat, I think you're fine with just the one.
I can't even see the one seat. Is the one seat that's facing forward the one with the blanket over it?
Yes, there's a blanket on the back of it there. So it's facing the TV. It's a little bit wider than a regular seat, but it is just one seat facing forward. All the speakers are aimed right at it.
Yes, it's disconcerting.
So
I can't see that there's much sonic difference between the Atmos surround and surround back speaker. They're all within like 3 degrees of each other.
It should be quite the hemisphere of sound at the back.
Yeah, I mean, it's
But yes, given that, I have to assume what he cares about is that seat, and as long as your bass sweep sounds good, I think you're done with just the one for now.
So he could spend the $2,000 he has to upgrade the 65-inch OLED to the 77-inch. Should he do that? I mean, again, is the picture too small? Or is the picture too big? I mean, I don't know.
I mean, I can kind of get behind that, that
at least would make a difference. I mean, honestly, you're not going to love me, but I'm going to tell you should get rid of a bunch of speakers.
I don't think that's happening at this point.
That's not going to happen, but you've got so many speakers in such a small localized area back there that I think you would have better intelligibility and more cohesive soundstage by just removing some of them. But you're not going to do that, and that's fine. And maybe relocating some of them, and that's fine. Or maybe the idea is this is not my forever room, this is just the room I'm in right now, and I will someday use these speakers in a different, bigger room, which is Rob's excuse for having way too many speakers in this very small room, which would be fine too. But honestly, I'm looking in this room and I'm thinking to myself, if I were going to spend money in this room, what would I spend money on? Acoustic treatments would make sense. But if you didn't do that, the next thing I would say was a different display. And that's only if you really needed one. Are you looking for 8K or 4K or whatever the K is that they got these days? Are you looking for variable refresh rates? Is the image?
I mean, he's
would
got
you
it. It would
appreciate
just be getting
image?
a bigger version of it.
Right. I'm like, so if it's just that you want a bigger image, then that would be a perfectly reasonable upgrade, I think. And probably the thing that will make the most noticeable difference for everybody other than you.
Yeah.
In this thing. So yes. But don't get a TV that's so big that you have to move your eyes. I mean, that's
that's not a problem looking at it. 77 isn't that big.
Yeah. Not pictures are some acoustic panels he has added to the walls. He'd be open to adding more. What would be the best use of his funds? Yeah, like I said, I don't know where your panels could go, much less are.
I mean, the left wall where he had some art before.
Is that the left wall? That's not behind. That's okay. So that whatever that art is could be replaced with some panels.
Which I think he already did from the description in his email. So
behind his couch is or behind his seat is open to something.
Open to the kitchen,
panel there.
No.
I just don't see. I mean, you could put some stuff in corners, but you got speakers all over the corners.
And he's got a window to the right. I mean, more than one window. So there's a little space in between the windows, I guess. Maybe a panel could go there if it hasn't already. He could do something on the front wall.
The front wall and the ceiling and the is about where you could do stuff.
Yeah.
And maybe, I guess, behind the front left and right speakers, or is that a door? I can't tell.
I mean, honestly, in terms of creating a noticeable difference in this room, given what he's already done, I think the TV size upgrade is the most noticeable difference you can make at this point.
I agree. Yeah. I would have a hard time figuring out where to put panels in here without removing things, and most people don't want to remove stuff. So, okay.
There you go.
Lieutenant Sulu only gave their handle, and they're a new listener. Okay, so Lieutenant Sulu. It's okay to be K. Sulu's niece just moved in, and are we sure it's not actually?
No, not in. Takei? Moved. She moved.
Well,
he's asking on.
I'm just saying that it could be George Takei. He just maybe it's trying to stay under the radar by using a name that he would never ever whatever. He's very busy tweeting right now, so I doubt he has time to watch TV other than election stuff. Sulu's niece just moved, and 2 of the rooms have Yamo in-wall speakers already installed. Only a pair, though. No center, no surrounds. She'd like to have a 5.1 setup in one of the rooms, and she'd prefer to replace the existing Yamo in-wall speakers rather than trying to match them. What do we recommend for reasonably priced but good-sounding in-wall speakers? You didn't give a price I'm seeing on here, except for reasonably priced.
That's
well,
right.
George Takei has a bunch of money as far as I know. So his reasonable, my reasonable, not the same reasonable as far as I'm concerned. But I would look at RBH.
Sure.
RBH has great offerings at multiple price points. So if you can find something within RBH, it doesn't really matter what you pick. It's going to sound good, and it's going to match well enough to everything else in their lineup, unless it's like some sort of weird one-off thing. But for most of RBH's lineup, it's all going to sound very good together. So you can mix and match as your price and the size of the speaker where you can install. Just remember, Lieutenant, that just because you want to put a speaker in a wall doesn't mean that wall wants to have a speaker put right there.
I mean, the ones that already exist, you're fairly certain that another speaker can go where the existing ones do. But as far as the center and the surrounds, got to be sure stud locations, pipes, electrical, HVAC, all that stuff. I mean, RBH, almost certainly the Visage series. If you're talking reasonably priced, it'll be the Visage series if you're going RBH. Now, if you want to go less expensive than that, because the RBH Visage series is not cheap. They start at about $120 per speaker. It's pretty cheap. But that's the starting point, because that's the least expensive one that they have. They go upwards of, $300, $350 per within that series. So if you want to go cheaper than that, mono price would be where you would look these days. I would point you to either the Alpha or the Amber series. Now, the Amber series has a folded ribbon tweeter in them. That means that, some of the dispersion. It's going to be a little bit more beamy coming out of there. It's not going to have quite as wide, even dispersion, whereas the Alpha series is a regular dome tweeter. So that would be how you get to a lower price point. But ones that I really like, that work for most people, very easy to use, and a very reasonable price at about $150 each, are HSUs. So they're HIW1s from Shoe Research, HSU. I would definitely point a lot of people that direction. Easy to drive. They are a horn-loaded design, but they sound very nice and a reasonable price.
Okay. Alan. Last week, we discussed Alan's 9 by 12.5 foot room with a sloped ceiling. We suggested laying things out so the room is wider than it's long, and that is what he's going to do.
Yay!
That was Rob's suggestion. Before we get to his questions, he wanted to let Tom know he also did a kitchen renovation and found mold. He ended up ripping out all the drywall and had to replace large sections of the subfloor in both the kitchen and laundry room, but he did all the work himself. They were without a kitchen for months, and that was when his wife was pregnant with their first child. Carpet was literally installed there while they were at the hospital. Talk about stress. When he told his wife that he needed a second subwoofer, but that SVS doesn't sell the PB12 NSD anymore, she said, "Oh, so sell it and get 2 matching subs." So she is definitely a keeper. Don't tell her that you could just totally buy a 2000 Pro and it would be just fine with your NSD, but whatever.
It would be totally fine. Also,
it would totally, yeah.
If you wait until Black Friday and our suspicions come true,
you could probably get one.
Of a not
Pro.
Not 2000 Pro, but a PB 2000.
We're guessing.
We are definitely guessing. Gary Yakubian, when the last time we talked to him, was like, no, we definitely aren't saying that that's going to happen. But if it were to happen, there would be no surprises or shocks on anybody's end. So
knock me over with a feather if that happens. I'll tell you that.
Keep an eye out if because I mean a PB 2000,
match just fine.
It's very slightly different from a P12 NST, but very very close, and the price might be.
I'll tell you how close they are. When I was up getting SVS speakers, they asked me about subs, and I have the PC 12 NSDs, and they said, "Should we send you new subs?" And I said, "Why? Why would you?" Yeah, no. Yes, this would be fine. So tell your wife, or don't.
Right.
But I would spend this money elsewhere. I'd say that the guys over at AVRant said that I can save a bunch of money if I just do this, and
I mean, at this point, Black Friday is close, so.
Yeah. And they're not doing Black Friday like everybody's doing it like the entire month is Black Friday. So I don't know. Just keep your eyes open. So walls are down in the theater room. No extensive soundproofing plans, but he'd like to at least put insulation in the walls. Any reason to pay more for Owens Corning inside the walls versus the pink stuff? The answer is no.
Not a whit.
Yeah.
Yep. No, cheap insulation for the interior walls. We're not worried about outside moisture things and any of that stuff. No. Cheap insulation, acoustically speaking, exactly the same as anything else.
Yeah. So now the window will be on the side wall and we'll have a curtain over it. Should he fill the window frame with insulation? So in that case, you may run into issues. We've talked about this before with like a skylight. That's it. You worry about moisture buildup and condensation and stuff. So my answer would be no. I would just put a nice heavy curtain over it. And I mean, it's not, if I remember correctly, based on the picture, it's not going to be like directly to your side or in where the first reflection point is or anything. So I would just not worry about it.
I mean, what you could do is, if you do want a first reflection point absorption panel, just get a freestanding panel, stand it behind the curtain.
Yeah.
That would be totally fine. I'm not too keen on filling in the whole window frame and kind of sealing that.
Yeah, if you were really wanting to do that, I would definitely have to talk to somebody who knew what they were talking about.
Yeah.
We're good with the AV stuff, but when it comes to like contracting stuff, we're not your guys. So
there's no vapor barrier. By code, you have to have a heat register below a window. There's a reason for that. So you're kind of blocking that if you blocked all it off with insulation. So a freestanding panel at the first reflection point, hide it with the curtain. I think you're good.
So he's debating about how much in-wall wiring to do. Is it best to run everything inside the walls, or maybe run things around the room behind the trim under and hidden under carpet, and then just have vertical sections in the walls where needed? What do we think? And should he have wall outlet openings for the cables and speaker wires, or get wall plates with binding posts and pass-through connections? So this is a very good question, and one that I have grappled with myself a number of times, because I think one of the worst things I did was run my wires in the walls. And the reason is because as things change over time, you run the risk of now I've got to replace this wire and I can't. Now, Rob's going to tell you, rightfully so, you run conduit to every place that you want there to be wires.
Anything that is in wall, when the walls are open,
right.
you just, wherever you were going to run wire, you run conduit, you run the wire inside of the conduit, and
right.
Now if you need to pull new wire through or change wires, you've got a conduit to pull it through.
But if you've got like a molding up top or a trim board at the bottom that you can remove and you can put...
This being a dedicated theater, curtain skirt.
Yeah, the curtain
skirt that goes. It was amazing how good that looked. Like you hear it and you're like, do I really want a little, piece of fabric that runs around the bottom perimeter? It looks great.
Yeah, I'll tell you, if I ever decide to upgrade to 4K or whatever, or 8K, whatever the projectors end up being when I do get a new projector, and I have to get a new HDMI cable, I'm going to have to do something like that. Like, sure. I literally don't know what I'm going to do. I think I'm going to end up getting off of projectors and onto direct view TVs again, because I don't think I'm going to have an option.
I have to say, I think, both from my personal experience and from what's been told to us by the people who did both, and with that curtain skirt idea and realizing how easy and how good it looks, I think running a lot of your wires outside of the walls in a way that's easy to hide, whether that's behind some baseboard or molding or whatever, I think that's a good way to go.
And what ends up happening is if you want to move a speaker or something, then all you have to do is punch because you can, running a wire up a wall is real
inside
easy.
A bay. Yeah.
It's real easy to do that. What's hard to do is to move it once it's already there, unless you can just pull the wire back down through. So yes, if this is a dedicated theater and then you know where your projector is going to go, run conduit to it, and it can be in the walls and it's fine. But
except he isn't doing a projector in this room. He's only going to be 7 feet away. So,
but
easy again.
With this, you can now start not worrying about all of that, and then just punch a hole and then put a little plate on it if you really want to. So your question, just get pass-through, the pass-through stuff, or, just like a little hole thing like they make for cable boxes and stuff like that. Or do you get like a dedicated, it doesn't make any difference. The only time you're going to run into an issue here is if you're doing some sort of like HDMI connection, and for whatever reason, it's somehow attenuating your signal. Then you would run into an issue. But speaker wire stuff, dude, this is just, copper to copper to copper, or copper to gold to copper, and it'll be fine. So if you want to put a plate up there, it's not going to, in any way attenuate your sound or give you any problems. It might look nice. To me, I'm like, it's just another connection I got. It's 2 more connections I have to make. And with 2 more times that I have to worry about, or at least 1 more time I have to worry about some little speaker wire getting loose, and I got to go find it, and then it touching and putting my receiver into protection mode. So some of that's laziness on my part. Some of that's just me thinking, it's just so much easier to change things if not everything is mounted in your wall, conduit or no conduit, if it's not all mounted in your wall. So that's me. If I had the option to do it all over again, especially since you only have the one door in here and that one window, I would run like that little curtain that Rob's talking about. Or if you want to do a molding or a trim package that allows you access to it easily, then I would do that all the way around the room, and then just whenever you want to change a wiring location, you just open that thing up, punch a hole where you want the speaker to be, pop a fish line down, grab the speaker wire, pull it back out, and Bob's your uncle. Just make sure you run a lot of extra wire.
And with the pink stuff insulation inside your walls, it'll be easier on that front too.
Yeah. Okay. So they've got a 1080p Hisense TV in the kitchen. Where is he? Hisense. I haven't. Do they sell those in America?
Yeah, they're quite popular in North America now.
Are they really? I didn't really start seeing them until I was in Australia, so maybe that's why. Hisense TV in the kitchen. It'll be 25 to 30 feet away from the theater room. He was thinking of maybe running a long HDMI cable so it can show the same source as the theater. But will that cause issues since it's only 1080p? At the moment, they use its built-in Wi-Fi for YouTube and such, but it isn't the most reliable thing. What do we think? I think you are asking for a god-awful number of problems if you do this.
I would not do this. My solution to you, because I believe he says he's using a Shield, NVIDIA Shield right now. Maybe you just get one of the Shield tubes and you plug that into your Hisense. And now all the streaming sources are the same with the same interface. They're two separate devices, but all the sources look the same with the same interface. That would allow you to maybe set up, the one that you already have as a Plex server. So even if you're watching a movie and you want to synchronize that in the kitchen, you could do that by just having it send it over to the Shield tube that's in the kitchen. I guess it doesn't work for your cable, but he didn't even describe that. He's like, I mostly just want to have the same streaming services in both rooms. I'm like, just get a separate streaming device. That's what I would recommend.
Yeah, that's what I would do too.
I
mean, one of the new Fire Sticks, one of the new Chrome, anything.
Google Chromecast, the Chrome, was it Google Chromecast with Google TV? We have to say the whole name.
I'm not saying that. So the reason why, just so you understand, is every time we've answered the question on this podcast about why my projector and my TV won't work together at the same time is because one of them's 1080p and the other one's 4K or that sort of thing.
Plus, he's getting a top-of-the-line OLED.
Right.
It's all the things. HDMI 2.1 on top of everything. I don't want
Hisense is not going to have Dolby Atmos.
I don't want to think
Dolby
about
Vision and HDR and everything else.
30-foot HDMI 2.1 cable either. I mean, at that point, you can buy an entirely new television for the price that cable would cost you.
Right.
So no, just get another streaming dongle. Plug that into your Hisense.
Yeah, I think we saved you about $3,000 so far. I hate to say it, but I'm pretty sure we've saved you at least $3,000. One more. Kerry asks, what's our stance on installing firmware updates for our AV equipment? Do we update immediately, research it first, or only update if there's a problem? Do we answer that first? Or do you want me to keep reading?
We can answer quickly. I do turn automatic updates off. So I do a quick little check to see, is anybody reporting problems on this thing? As long as it looks all clear, then I go ahead and update it. Even if I'm not having a problem, I'll go with the most up-to-date firmware as long as nobody's reporting problems with it.
And I never bothered to look at any of that.
Okay.
So if it is automatically set to update, then it auto updates. And if it's not automatically set to update, then every once in a while I'll get a reminder that I need to update my firmware, and then I'll either ignore it because I want to do something else, or I'll do it. Now, the receivers and stuff like that, I can't remember the last time I got an update that I needed to push through. But the Ultra HD Blu-ray player from Sony that I have needs to update app services like every time I turn the dang thing on, right? And it's pretty fast, so it doesn't bother me that much, but it does ask me, and no, I will tell you, I have never researched anything to see if it needed to do anything. I just press yes and deal with the repercussions. And no, I am not unaware that I am just asking for problems someday and bricking a device. I know that. I just don't care. And I live on the edge, sir. Live on the edge. So Kerry got a prompt to update his Marantz receiver, and the update failed, leaving the Marantz unusable until the power was cycled. Thankfully, unplugging it and plugging it back in got it to finish the download and install the new firmware, but it was a bit scary there for a moment. Exactly. See? It all worked out fine.
I mean, the thing is, the auto update in a device, it's like that's the official release channel. Yeah. So like if you did that and they really screwed something up, which, hey, let's face it, there have been firmware updates that have created issues, which is why I do things the way I do it and don't rely on just auto updates and do look it up. But, if it does, I mean, they're kind of obligated to at least try to help you because it was there. Right. I mean, it's one thing if you're searching the corners of the internet for beta firmwares or third-party firmwares that aren't officially supported, and you do something there, okay, you're on your own. But like the official channel that comes through the built-in internet connection via the auto update, it's like something screws up, they gotta help you. So
Well, and that's sort of my thing is, what I don't do is I almost never sideload anything. I never, go out there and look for a firmware that I have to download to a USB drive so I can get it onto something. I wait until, Marantz, Denon, Sony, whomever says, hey, we need to update this thing or your thing's not going to work. And then I press yes. So that's me. Then again, I've had nothing but Pixel and Nexus and the original Google phones since they started coming out. And the minute I find out there's a new Android or update or whatever, I run out to go find it and get it onto my phone immediately because I want all the newest, shiniest apps and stuff. Even when I find out it's going to break some of my games that I play, I'm like, Pokemon Go is not going to work until they figure it out. They'll figure it out, and I just download it anyways. All right, let's do David.
Yeah, it's short.
David says, long time, first time. All right. Welcome.
All right. Welcome.
David is planning the layout for his basement home theater. He heard us suggest many times that a 45-degree field of view is very nice for the screen, and he figures he will likely end up with something very close to that. He is planning to have an acoustically transparent screen with the center speaker behind it, but he's wondering about the front, left, and right speakers. A lot of high-end home theaters seem to be built with all three front speakers behind the screen, but Dolby says that to have the front, left, and right speakers 45 to 60 degrees apart. So shouldn't the speakers actually be outside of the screen? What do we think you should aim for in this theater? Well, I'm going to be honest with you, Dave. A lot of times we talk about having that acoustically transparent screen and the center channel behind it. It gets the center channel up and blah, blah, blah. Without knowing anything else about your basement, I would not immediately decide that I was going to have an acoustically transparent screen unless I was also planning on having a false front wall to put it in.
Sure.
Just makes the whole thing a lot easier. And then since it's a false wall, it doesn't really matter where your speakers are in relation to your screen because it's all about the field of view. I mean the degrees separation and how big your couches are and stuff like that. If that puts it behind the screen, it puts it behind the screen. If it doesn't put it behind the screen, it doesn't put it behind the screen. It doesn't really matter. And remember, in movie theaters and stuff like that, and some of these bigger, professional custom install theaters, the whole front wall is a screen, and they're sitting way far back, and they're not 45 degrees off axis to those speakers most of the time. It's much less than that. So, and that's because the screen is so big and they're sitting so far away. So don't worry about whether or not the speakers are inside or outside the screen. Just worry about whether or not you even need this. Because it saves a lot of money if you go with the fixed screen and you put your center channel below it. And I mean, most of the time, in most situations, you will not be able to tell one iota of a difference from the center being below it or inside of it.
To me, the cutoff for a projection screen and whether I would accept having the center speaker below it or I would much prefer to have it actually behind the screen and have acoustically transparent. For me, the size cutoff is about 120 inches. At 120 inches, I am totally willing to have the center speaker below the screen because sort of the ideal height that you would mount a 120-inch screen and the height of a 120-inch screen, both of those things are not so much that, the center speaker would have to be like right on the floor in order to fit below it. You can still have the center speaker a nice, 20 inches off the floor. The 120-inch screen goes above that without it being far too high. Once you go beyond that size of screen, though, and I don't know the exact size he's going for, but, he might be going 135, 150, 160, who knows? If you're in that sort of size range, then I go, yeah, I would prefer to have the center speaker behind it at this point. It's all about field of view. And to me, like, I'm going to have my left and right speakers at about, 23, 24, 25 degrees to my left and right, plus or minus. And if that happens to fall within the edges of the screen, then they're going to go behind the screen. If they happen to fall to the outside edges of the screen, like they do with a flat panel, then that is also fine. It's certainly not a choice of, my speakers must go behind my screen. It's just you go with the angles, and that's what it is. Because, I mean, some people, they like that 1-to-1 ratio of screen width to distance. And so they end up with a 55-degree field of view. That's what they end up with. That's what they like. Then got no problem with that if they know that that's what they like. And then your speakers are probably going to be inside the edges of your screen. Whereas if you're like me and you like a 45-degree field of view, then your speakers are going to be the outside edges.
All right, who do we have left?
We have J A, Mitch R, Jonathan F. Is that it? That's it.
All right. I will remind you, we do have our Thankful and Infinite podcasts coming out on Thanksgiving Day. And this is AVRant, and we will answer your questions on this podcast. I mean, technically, we prefer AV and home theater questions, but I suppose you could ask us anything.
We've had other topics.
We have.
Time to time.
I mean, I'll be happy to answer them. We could do. You got a problem with your relationships? Ask me. You want to know something? But I don't know what Rob does when he's not doing AV. I was going to say, what was Rob think? I cook. I do the kitchen stuff. I got kids. You know, I think Rob I think he lives in the AV cave.
I'm a man of mystery. No one shall ever know.
No one will ever. Ooh, if you want to know anything about She-Ra or the My Little Ponies, there's your Rob.
Or so you think you can dance?
So you think you could dance? Is that show still on?
It is. Well, they didn't make a season this season. Surprise, surprise.
Yeah.
A little bit difficult for dancers to audition in the summer this year. Who knows why? Who can remember?
Who can remember? There was an election. We can't remember any of that. All right. If you want to get your questions answered, just ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. We want to thank our listeners of the week. We want to thank Clay and Jonathan for going to avrant.com, clicking on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link, and giving us a PayPal donation, as well as our 122 patrons, including John, over on patreon.com.
Yeah, so Clay and Jonathan, thank you both so much for the PayPal donations. Anybody else, you come to avrant.com, and on the right-hand side, it says Support AVRant. There's a picture of a cup of coffee that Tom made. That's how you get to PayPal. And over at patreon.com/AVRant podcast, you can sign up for a voluntary subscription, an automatic monthly donation. $1 is the minimum, as much as you please is the maximum. And we have 122 patrons over there, including John. Thank you for being one of them.
All right. We want to thank John for talking us up to Cross Spectrum Labs, and for John again with the hat trick. Gurinder, Mitch, Jonathan, and Art for their notes of gratitude. Thank you, gentlemen.
Yes, for sure. John, congrats on that UMic 1 purchase. Thank you so much for talking us up to Cross Spectrum Labs. And John, Gurinder, Mitch, Jonathan, and Art really do appreciate the notes of gratitude and encouragement that are still rolling in. So, that's very nice. Thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions.
For AVRant, I'm Tom Antry.
And I'm Rob H. Now stay in and listen to something.
Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AVRant.
Now go out and listen to something.